Batman, The Golden Years, Gotham City, New Jersey, May of 2020. It's a age of darkness, an age of fear. It's the new decade, the 2020s, and so far it's started off in a very bad foot for everybody, not only in Gotham City, but for the entire world. Well, for one man, it was assigned to retire. His name was Don Carson, a man about 70, African American. He was a drug smuggler. He was always minor in the Gotham City underworld. And as the major players had gone down over the years, he managed to stay ahead of the police and Batman and keep himself afloat. But now, with Tiger Security going after him and shutting down a lot of his operations, he now knew it was the time just to bail. With most of his operations shut down, he shut down a lot of the other parts of it and he consolidated into just a small, manageable outfit. And now he was going over the plans with what remained of his men. He says in the briefing, "All right, gentlemen, this is our final job. Once this is pulled off, we'll make enough money, and then we can all just leave Gotham City for new adventures. For me, I'm leaving to Key West and living out the rest of my days down there," he says. Then, as he was going over the operations, one of the men says, "Boss, what about the drug houses? There's like only 3 that we have left in operation." Then Don says to that man, "Well, I'm aware of that. We'll make our money from those 3 remaining drug houses, and once it's done, it'll be up to Mike here to shut it down." He was pointing to Mike. Mike Gamble was his right-hand man for 25 years. A slender white man with graying temples. He then says, once the first half of the operation, the delivery, occurs, then Mike here will assume the rest of the operations and distributions, and once that is done, all of it will be shut down and you men will be handsomely paid and you'll all go your separate ways. The guys were all happy, and Mike was even smiling. And after the briefing was over, then Mike goes up to Don and he says, "Don, are you sure about this?" Don says, "Yes, Mike, I am sure." And he goes on to say, "I have a feeling that this Arkham City that's going to open up in November is going to be more of a concentration camp than some super prison," he says. And then he goes on to say to Mike, "Well, my wife has already moved down to our new home in Key West, and we already sold our house. I'm staying at a Motel 8 until this job is done. And once this job is done, Mike, well, the first half, I'm gone. Then it's up to you just to get everything distributed, and once that's done, just like I said, shut down everything, sell off all the remaining assets here in Gotham City, and get the hell out." But unbeknownst to old man Don, his conversations and his briefings were being listened into. On the building across the street from the warehouse where the briefing was taking place, crouched in the rooftop, was Batman, with a special listening device shaped like a rifle. The device shoots out a needle-thin sonic beam that could pick up conversations from a mile away, and it picked up more than your conventional directional microphone. Batman had recorded the entire meeting and the conversation between Don and Mike. Once he was done, he lets go the trigger, gets up, and pulls out the SD card from the center of the device. Later at the Batcave, when Batman got back, he quickly took off his Batsuit, did a quick shower, and Bruce sat down in front of the Bat computer, inserted the SD card in the reader, and listened to the entire meeting and the conversation between Don and Mike. Once he was finished, he sent it via email to the commissioner. Then Bruce leaned back on the chair and he was thinking long and hard. Should he or should he not apprehend Don Carson? He knew if he apprehended Don Carson, Don was not going to make it inside Arkham City. And after a half an hour of deep thought, Bruce Wayne decided just to shut down the operation and apprehend Don Carson and turn him over to the commissioner personally. Well, the next night in Dixon Docks, a giant cargo ship called the Liparus was docked there, and all the cargo was being transferred via crane to the docks. Activities like these at the docks is not unusual, unless you count the fact that it was actually late night, then it was unusual. The dock was teeming with Carson's men. Some were just keeping guard, armed with assault rifles, and some were helping to move the containers into the truck. But unbeknownst to them, standing like a guardian on one of the cranes was Batman, and he was there watching the whole thing through the scope of some sort of rifle like device. It was not the listening device, it was something else. And Batman had it trained onto the semi. And once he had it where he wanted at, then he pulls a trigger, and it turned out to be an airsoft rifle, and it fired a tracking device onto the truck. Once that was done, Batman leaps off and glides away from the top of the crane. Well, once the cargo was loaded onto the truck starts its engines and takes off. But the truck was not alone. It was being escorted by 6 vehicles, 3 Dodge Chargers, and 3 Dodge SUVs. As they were driving and escorting the vehicle, they go past one entryway to a warehouse, and there, sitting in the dark, was the Batmobile. As they drove past, the yellow LED headlights of the Batmobile turn on, and Batman hits the startup button, starting up the Batmobile's powerful 800 horsepower supercharged Boxer 6. Then Batman puts it in drive and floors it out. As Batman was laying into pursuit, he quickly catches up to the first of the escort vehicles, a Dodge Charger, and Batman quickly presses the button to activate the level 1 rocket boost to give him a quick burst of extra speed. Well, the Batmobile rammed into the rear end of the first Dodge Charger. The Charger lost control and crashed into a building. Well, Batman quickly caught up to the Dodge SUV. The back end of the SUV flew right off to reveal that it had a Gatling gun, and the guy that was operating it began to fire at the Batmobile. But it was no match for the Batmobile's armor. Then Batman activates the laser defense system, and he presses the trigger button on the steering wheel, and soon firing out of the hidden emitters in the headlights were laser beams that made short work of the SUV. Then, eventually, Batman makes short work of the rest of the escort. Then he finally catches up to the semi. And as he was right behind the semi, Batman presses the button to activate the missiles. The radar system locks on, and Batman fires. Batman hits the brakes on the Batmobile, and he looks as the semi was destroyed along with its shipment of drugs. Then Batman puts the Batmobile in reverse, does a 3-point turn, and puts it in drive and drives off. Now he dealt a serious blow to Don Carson's plans. Meanwhile, back at the warehouse that was owned by Don Carson, Carson was overseeing the final packing of his personal stuff, namely his two cherished vehicles, his fully restored 1969 Mustang Boss 1 and his Harley Davidson motorcycle. Once they were in the back of a semi, the door shuts, and Don says, "Well, that's the last of them." Then Mike comes running up to him, and he says, "Don, oh God, bad news, man." Don looked, and he said, "Don't tell me. The shipment." Mike nods his head yes, and he says to Don, "Tony's the only one that survived. The Batman, he pretty much killed everybody in the escort caravan. We still have the guys on the dock. They're just waiting for you to bring the truck with your vehicles in it, sir." Then Don says to Mike, "Mike, go with plan B." Mike says yes, and he runs to the warehouse office. And then he tells the rest of the guys in the warehouse, "All right, fellas, the Batman just ruined our plans, so we're going to plan B. Once I get to Key West and we liquidate all of our assets in Gotham City, you all will be paid with the money from the liquidation." The guys nodded their head, yes, that they understood, and he told them, "All right, guys, leave now, quickly." So the rest of his men left the warehouse, and after Mike was done, Mike comes out and he says to Don, "Don, made the phone call, told everybody what's going on. Let's get the hell out of here, man." Don says, "Come on, let's get in the truck." So the two men get into the semi, and Don starts the semi and drives off to Dixon Docks, where he was going to have the Liparist take him to Key West with his precious cargo, his vehicles. Well, as they had pulled out of the warehouse and got on to Banneker Road, suddenly Don sees in the rearview mirror of the truck the Batmobile was coming up on them quick, and Don says, "Mike, it's the Batman. He's right behind us." Mike looks at the rearview mirror in the passenger side and it's like, "Oh no." And sure enough, the Batmobile fires its lasers, hitting all the 18 wheels of the semi, stopping it. Well, the semi's brakes slam, bringing it to a complete stop. The Batmobile pulls up, its canopy opens. Batman quickly jumps out and opens the driver's side door of the cabin. Nothing. The seats were empty. Then he hears the loud slam of metal, and he hears a motorcycle take off. He sees a Harley taken off, and there was a man riding it with a helmet. And without giving a second thought, Batman quickly gets back in the Batmobile and takes off after the Harley Davidson. Well, Batman quickly catches up to the Harley Davidson, and as the rider was trying to outmaneuver the Batmobile, he ends up crashing into a street light, and the rider quickly goes airborne and crashes right through the display window of a flower shop. Batman pulls up, gets out of the Batmobile, and runs up. He sees the rider laying on a bed of flowers in the display window, and he quickly knew it was not Don Carson. Don was heavyset. This guy was thin. He was suspecting it was probably Mike Gamble, his right-hand man. And he goes up and lifts the visor, and he was right. It was Mike Gamble. And Mike says with his dying breath, "You're too late, Batman. Carson is heading to Dixon Docks. Liparist. Red Boss Mustang." And Mike was dead. Then Batman quickly runs back into the Batmobile and starts it up and drives off. He gets on the communicator and says,
"Oracle, come in. It seems like Carson's giving me the slip. According to Gamble's dying breath, he's getting away in a 69 Boss Mustang. Did you see anything via satellite or the transit cameras?"
Oracle replies back, "Yes, Batman, I did see a 69 Boss Mustang, fire engine red, quickly speed out of the back of the semi shortly after you started pursuit with the motorcycle. And according to the satellite image, she says, he's at a stoplight at the intersection of 22nd and 23rd Street. And she says to Batman, that is the same stoplight that takes a very long time to change to green. Then Batman acknowledges and lays in pursuit. Where Dawn was at was only maybe 3 blocks away. And sure enough, Dawn sees in the rearview mirror of his Mustang the Batmobile coming up on him hot. Then Dawn floors it. And soon a high-speed chase was ensuing. Even though Dawn had a very powerful muscle car, Batman's Batmobile was no pushover. It had a powerful engine, and it had the advantage of being lighter weight, more horsepower, and having all-wheel drive. As Batman was starting to catch up to Dawn's old Mustang, Dawn knew he had to lose Batman, and he knew the area very well, so he makes a hard right turn onto 18th Street. Day or night, 18th Street's traffic was always terrible, and it being 2 o'clock in the morning made no exception. But he quickly weaved in and out of the slow-moving cars, and he was starting to lose the Batmobile. And then when there was a small patch of clearance, Dawn quickly slammed the brakes of his Mustang, and since it was an old vehicle, it had no anti-lock brakes, so the brakes locked, and Dawn executed a moonshiner's turn and went back the other way. And as Batman was finally getting some speed as he was clearing some cars, he could see Dawn's Mustang shooting past him the opposite direction. And Batman then hits a switch which turns off the anti-lock brakes of the Batmobile, and he executes a moonshiner's turn also. Within a few minutes, the Batmobile was starting to catch up to the boss Mustang. And also the high-speed chase was drawing the attention of the police, and they were starting to join in on the chase. Well, desperate to lose everybody, he was trying to push the car as fast as he could. Dawn was reaching 120 miles an hour in his Mustang, and he said aloud to himself, "You're not taking me alive." But he also was not paying attention, since he was keeping his eyes on the rearview mirror. He didn't see that the light was red ahead, and there was only one vehicle at the stoplight, a city bus. And when Dawn moved his eyes to see what was ahead, it was too late. He couldn't stop, and Dawn's Mustang collided head-on to the backside of the city bus. Dawn did not survive the crash. He didn't have a seatbelt on, and he was going 120 miles an hour. You can't win against the laws of physics. The Batmobile pulls up, but Batman can see from the inside there was nothing he can do. The city bus had very little damage to it, but the Mustang was a complete wreck. Then Batman continues to drive away. The police eventually come, stop, and cordon off the area, and it was over for Don Carson. After over 45 years of being a drug smuggler and distributor in Gotham City, he could not retire to enjoy his golden years. Like and subscribe. The end.